They discovered it, they read it, and they applied it. It's the golden thread that connects the titans of the self-development industry, the source that spawned millions of millionaires, the original blueprint to success.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Think and Grow Rich.
Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. It's a classic. A classic.
And I love Think and Grow Rich. I love it. It's right here. I mean, it's one of my favorite books of all time.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
This material is what changed my life. This is the material I study every day. From being an immigrant woman, coming from poverty, and really coming to America and literally achieving the American dream. I can't even tell you how grateful I am for this man, for what he did for me and my family.
Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve.
People don't realize is that when we let our ego get in our way, ego is the loss, the fear of loss. So need to be right, the need to be offended, the need to be hurt, fearful. When that trajectory changes, what happens is you continually go the wrong way. So my job as a coach is to say, let's get into the enjoyment of the direct pursuit of my potential. Right? And so when the light went on, it was not about the potential of making money and being an entrepreneur, which is one of my specialties. And I said to him, look, this is an opportunity now to show how great you really are. We can't let the outside voices, right, determine our success. The happiness that we have comes within. Why are you going to give that control to somebody else?
Thoughts become things. And I always wonder, why did no one teach us this? Why did we not learn this in school? Why did we not learn this from our families? If you make your study a priority, your life will change.
And I came up with 4 really valuable things that I took stock in. And the first one was gratitude. Simple gratitude. Although I grew up with nothing, I was always grateful. Throughout the whole process of consistently, persistently pursuing my potential, I was grateful. It made my past better, my present brighter, and my future even brighter than that. In fact, I tell people all the time, if you want to change your life, change your employee's life, your family life, it's very simple. 2 words, say thank you. Welcome. Well, Gigi's going to put Blaine on there right away. She's on top of it. Welcome, everyone, to the Napoleon Hill training. I have my special guest today, Blaine Bartlett, co-hosting with me, moving possibilities into reality. Just want to remind everyone, we're going to be in Newport Beach tomorrow at our mastermind. Then we'll be in Vegas next week as well. We got the car wash, which includes meetups, holding courts, interviews, speeches, including masterminds or TV shows. Vegas is season 10 of Office Hours. Then to New York for our Wealth Growth Mastermind in New Jersey. Phoenix is the Professional Athlete Community Mastermind and car wash at all these. Then we have the Masters Mastermind in Augusta, Georgia with a car wash. Then back to Aspire Tour in Phoenix, and then the SoFi Mastermind. That's how you get to 200 cities a year. If you want to be informed or invited, make sure you text us 949-298-2905, 949-298-2905. Be informed and invited. And today's training is always, if you'd like the training guides and exercises or my book for free, it's david@dmeltzer.com. david@dmeltzer.com for our books, guides, exercises for free as well. And we are going to train today, Blaine and I, in a discussion, a fireside chat about the power of paradox. There's so many paradoxes, and it's because the universe has force and counterforce to it. But let's start by welcoming my mentor. He was probably the greatest student of Bob Proctor. He's also the best friend of Bob Proctor. So he had that advantage going as well, who had such a significant impact on both my life and Blaine's. Blaine Bartlett, welcome to the Power of Paradox training here with the Napoleon Hill Institute.
Hey, David, it is a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah, well, I look forward to making this a habit as well and having you join me. Now, are you going to be staying afterwards to answer questions as well?
Yeah, I can do that. I've cleared my calendar a bit here, so I can stay up to a half an hour if we've got.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll run this sucker till 12:30. I got to go celebrate lunch with my birthday boy who passed his driver's test.
He
So
did. Oh boy.
27 years of carpooling is ended. We are no longer carpool. I got another designated driver in the system. This is beautiful. Anyways, let's get right to it. One of the most, Blaine, one of the most powerful ideas that we can understand in business and life is paradox. If you've ever read Dr. David Hawkins with Power versus Force, and the paradoxes that exist between those, paradox is when two ideas that seem contradictory are both true at the same time. We work harder, but learn to relax more. We give more and somehow receive more. We let go of control and our influence grows. Our minds want simple answers, but life rarely works that way. The highest performers don't eliminate paradox, they learn to operate inside of it. When understanding paradox, we stop fighting reality and start working with it in the flow. And today I want to explore with you paradoxes that show up in business leadership and personal growth and how we can use them to guide our decisions and our actions. I'm going to start with one of my favorite paradox, the hard things paradox. And I call it cutting your right, if you're right-handed, cutting your right hand fingernails first. Avoiding difficult conversations, decisions, responsibilities may feel easier in the moment, but it often creates bigger problems later. When we face challenges early, we strengthen our relationships, business, and personal growth. What have you found about this hard things paradox that can help our Napoleon Hill community members to understand how we lean into the difficult?
The idea of paradox, and I love this topic. The law of polarity comes into play here if we begin to think about it in those terms. There's two ends to a stick, so both things exist, both are true. And if I eliminate one or try to eliminate one, what I'm actually doing is eliminating access to what is possible. So when I can begin to embrace paradox, that there is a truth here and there's a truth here, I begin to have a wider spectrum that I can actually work with, and it allows me to be more resourceful. I can, an idea here, that you can think of is, some of the clients I work with, they want to be more, as a leader, they want to be more empathetic, in their organization. I just want to, demonstrate more empathy for where people are at. Well, you don't get empathy. You don't have empathy. You have opportunities to be empathetic. And that's the paradox, because you'll have something show up that it's kind of like, well, that really pisses me off. Okay. Now that's actually, it kind of kicks that up, but it's also an opportunity to be empathetic. So the same would be true with courage, an opportunity to be courageous. I'm not courageous. I have opportunities to be courageous. So it's part of this continuum. And I have to begin to look at it from the standpoint of life isn't happening to me, it's happening for me.
Well, I think it's in the paradox of life is happening through me and the meaning that provides the differentiator. So both sides of this are true. And therefore, it's the meaning that we give it and allowing life to come through us, to us is beneficial. For us, to us is a punishment, but for us is beneficial. But through us, I think acknowledges the paradox and acknowledges an awareness that all exists and that we are interfering with that in which we want to coincide in our own journey, in our own divine direction and devotion. And specifically, when you're looking at the idea of this paradox in life coming for us or through us, we avoid hard things. And it is, the hard things, the struggles, the mistakes, the setbacks, where the solution already lies. It's just a lapse of time, and the meaning we give the lapse of time and the intention we give within the context of that time that allows the resolution, the resolution to appear. When you choose hard actions today, what is created in the future?
Growth. More than anything else. And this kind of moves us into the growth paradox, which is the other paradox here. But the organism, and this is true of every living organism, it seeks stasis, it seeks comfort, it seeks stability. That's the paradox. So that is true. That's what the organism seeks. The only way that we actually excel in life, the only way we actually achieve in life is to be uncomfortable. We have to move outside of our comfort zone. So that is also a truth. So both of these things exist. And it's a question of which one do I feed? Which one do I feed?
Yeah, and when we talk about that, and there's so many different parables and stories
Yeah.
about this paradox about feeding, one of the paradoxes is just because someone bleeds you doesn't mean they don't feed you. And I use as two specific examples: raising children. If anyone tells you their kids don't bleed you, they're lying. But that bleeding is a form of feeding. And then on the other side of life was the transition of my mom, who in her later years, not nearly as much as I bled her, but she bled me at the later layers of her life. And that bleeding was one of the greatest feedings for me as well. In the construct of growth and the hard things and this paradox of feeding and bleeding, how do we decipher whether bleeding is actually interfering with our success or it's actually providing us growth?
I love that question. It kind of comes down to, for me anyway, and I'll just speak from my own experience. I work with this notion of for the sake of what.
Yes, which you taught me, and I've propelled and promoted that because it's such a great distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's all about personal meaning. What matters to me? What matters? So when I'm confronted with this conundrum, the fallback is going to be what matters to me, because this will be true and this will be true. Only one of them will actually feed what matters to me, and that
That's so
is a
smart.
really important distinction to work with.
Yeah, no, it really is. And meaning is so important within the context of everything, but especially paradoxes. And as you stated, instead of I'll be happy when, which is a meaning that we can give to hard situations, struggles, setbacks, failures, mistakes, etc., or defining moments, or even historical relevances, when we start looking at for the sake of what, aligned with the Napoleon Hill philosophy and institute, we then instill or empower people with with for sake of what, with a definiteness of purpose. See, there's no purpose in I'll be happy when. Purpose is in for the sake of what.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's interesting because it's always shifting. What was important to me in my 20s is not as important. It doesn't mean that it's not important, but it's not certainly as important as what's available to me and what's important to me now in this later stage of my life. Both of them exist.
Right. Both of them exist. And that's hard for people to comprehend.
Yeah. So which one matters now? And that question of what matters now keeps me present. It keeps me out of the past, keeps me out of the future, keeps me present.
It actually is one of the catalytic things that set me on a path to understand that some things become non-negotiable. So you're just steadfast regardless of the circumstances, and some things become negotiable for the sake of. And I think it's important to have those distinguished behaviors between no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm going to spend a minimum of time on my sleep, my health, my family, my faith, my finance, the study of time and the study of relativity. But negotiably, I'll use the Eisenhower matrix, for example, according to the circumstances of the day. Here's how I'm going to prioritize my non-negotiable behaviors within the context of knowing for the sake of what am I present, for the sake of what am I doing, saying, thinking, feeling, and believing in the 24 hours of activities that I get every day, except for the last day of my life when I'm cheated. Now, if anybody would like the bleeding and feeding exercise, I'd love to send that to you. Email me, david@dmeltzer.com, along with the training today in my book, david@dmeltzer.com. You can get the feeding and bleeding template and exercise. Now, one of my favorite paradoxes that you've coached more people, including me, you coach, but you've coached more people than most people on earth. And this is a paradox that is so hard as a coach, teacher, and a mentor. It's, the slow then suddenly paradox. Things happen very slowly and then all of a sudden. And so people that we work with get attached to an outcome and get impatient and they quit. How does this paradox impact people? Because I think it's the most difficult in entrepreneurship.
The part of the difficulty is, we live in a very interesting reality structure, space-time. Embedded in space-time, and this is really, it's an embedded component, is scarcity. There's not enough time. There's not enough distance. There's not enough. So embedded in the context of space-time is this notion of scarcity. So when I'm looking at this slow suddenly paradox, most people will gravitate towards, I've done everything I said I was supposed to do. Where is it? Okay. And scarcity comes into play. It's, I haven't devoted enough time to it. I haven't devoted enough resources to it. One of the ways that I work with that with the clients with whom I work is it's already happened. I just haven't arrived yet.
Yeah.
Just that little meme. It's already happened. I just haven't arrived. Everything is
it's already happened. Already happened. What am I doing to interfere with it? So
that's part of it. Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes the interference is thinking that I can actually do something.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. So in the study of Sufism, there's a notion of effortless efforting. Yeah. I'm going to do stuff. I'm going to do stuff in my life, but Napoleon Hill and Neville Goddard talk about the fallacy, the illusion, the delusion that I can do anything to make a difference. I do stuff, but the universe is working at its own pace, in its own speed. 38 billion years it's been delivering results. Yeah. Who am I to think that it won't deliver results?
Yeah, and part of that is faith, because in the paradox of the slow then suddenly paradox is the fact that today in the present, my behaviors may be aligned with where I want to be or better, but the evidence is not. The evidence is usually non-existent, or even worse, the evidence that we see today is contrary to where we want to be or better, even if our behaviors today, and maybe even for the last few weeks, months, or years, have been aligned with our divine direction. The evidence today is non-existent or contrary. Therefore, it takes faith to understand the slow then suddenly paradox, that who am I to interfere with what's already done?
Exactly. And the part of that paradox is I look at my physical reality and I see something. Well, this is the truth. It does exist. But faith is in the unknown. It's already happened. I just haven't arrived. I have to, that faith is the paradox. It is real. It's a truth. So both truths exist simultaneously. Which one do I feed?
Yeah, Napoleon Hill and many others, Bob Proctor, we all talk about the rule of 72 as applicable to money, but it actually applies to behaviors that, it takes about 90% of the time and effort to get to 25% of the way there when things are doubling. So you go from 25% of the way there to 50 to 100 in the last 10% of the effort, time, etc. That also falls within the slow things happen very slowly, then all of a sudden paradox. If you'd like that exercise about exponential growth acceleration, aggregation, and how to utilize non-negotiable and negotiable behavior, email me, David, that means beloved, at D, first initial, Meltzer means servant, David at dmeltzer.com. Get your exercises and guides for that paradox with the non-negotiable and negotiable behaviors. Now, the next paradox, Blaine, that I want to talk about,
I love this one.
Yeah, me too. The intelligence paradox. As we grow in knowledge and experience, we often realize how much more there is to learn. I call it the farther you go, the less you know paradox.
Yep.
And I used to use this when my mom told me to study. I would tell her, Mom, the more I study, the more I know. The more I know, the more I forget. The more I forget, the less I know. So why study? But more importantly, it didn't work. So many respect. But there's a difference between awareness and learning. And I think that's where the paradox lies. I know you have shed some great light onto me about awareness and how learning elevates our awareness, and our awareness is different than understanding how much we know.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Oh, yeah. Learning is integrated awareness.
Mm,
And that's one way to think about it. Until it's been integrated into my experience, into my body, into my whole self, it remains just information. And information by itself actually is pretty useless.
mm.
So does it exist? Yes, it exists. But it's the integration of it. This is where intelligence comes into play.
Yeah,
The integration.
inspiration. Yeah, inspiration, intelligence, intuition, information is taking thought into form, but it
Exactly.
needs that integration in order for it to have an elevated awareness or a materialization, monetization component to it. Um, how about questions and suggestions within the intelligence paradox? How important is it that we're more interested than interesting? That we don't have a need to be right, offended, separate, or inferior, or superior in this intelligence paradox? Because so many people use comparative analysis. They use their ego to feel more
Mhm.
intelligent than other people, when that has nothing to do with how much you know, or what level of awareness or frequency you're living.
The paradox there is oftentimes we'll ask questions to confirm a bias that we have. And I want to be able to use questions to um, illuminate something I don't know. And
Mm,
s- questions serve two purposes, as far as I can tell. One is obvious, it's the gathering of information. The second is it points direction. So if I'm looking as a leader to cause movement in my organization towards a specific outcome, the nature of the question I ask is really important. I want to ask questions that will cause people to search in the direction I want them to go. The answer is there. The whole idea of, show me a sign. Well, signs are latent. Signs show up after things have moved. They never point direction to something. They indicate that you're on the path to something. So that's kind of how that comes into play.
yeah, I think understanding open minds and how they're relative to the open questions that we ask about what they like, don't like, know, don't know, works and doesn't work, and provide value, because that sets as a platform or a premise of, would it help you if I gave you more of what you like, or more of what you know, or
Mhm.
more of what's working, or take away what you don't like or don't know, or what's not working, which leads into a real paradox that so many people fall into. I think people don't understand the difference between discipline and devotion. So many people, like I was when I was young, I was so busy working, I'd forget to make money. I was so disciplined in working, I'd forget to make money. I was so disciplined in working, I forget to take care of my health. I was so disciplined in working, I forgot to take care and to spend time with my family, when the only time or thought about working was, I'm going to do this so I make more money, have more time with my family, and be healthier. And completely stuck in the effort paradox, that trying to force, as you mentioned earlier, outcomes can actually reduce or resist performance.
Yeah. And Napoleon Hill talks about in his book, Outwitting the Devil, drift. One of the ways that drift begins to appear is when we get so fixated on an outcome, as an example, that we begin to lose connection to the environment is moving us away from what we want. Our behavior is moving us away from what we say we want. And we start correcting for that behavioral move, and the destination starts to, because we're shifting for behavior, we're compensating for drift and behavior. We don't really compensate for the need to reorient back to what matters.
So
So that's where that comes into play.
yeah, no, and it is, and by the way, if anybody wants the open-minded, open question guide, once again, email me, david@dmeltzer.com. I always need my commercial breaks to get everybody the exercises, guides, and books. david@dmeltzer.com if you want that. We actually can create resistance by our effort, and
Absolutely.
Wayne Dyer, one of our other mentors and friends, would always say, I think you got it from Xander's, what you resist, persist. Um, in the context of resistance being a force and an effort, right? It takes effort to resist. It is a force. And as Hawkins, as I mentioned earlier, always said, right, force creates a counter force. How can we get people to understand within the context of the effort paradox, what you resist persists, and you have to still be active to surrender, but not control in the surrender?
And surrender is the key word there. I really think that is the key word. Michael Singer talks about this in his
Best
Surrender
book.
Experiment.
Yep.
Great book, that and The Untethered Soul. The universe is continuously conspiring, and it is a beneficent universe. I firmly believe that. The problem exists when I get in the way of it. And you mentioned this earlier. We will get in the way of what seems to occur, what seems to be happening, because we want to push it harder. We want to make it happen faster. We want to be able to settle back. And this is, when we talk about flow states, when you get into a flow state, essentially what you're doing is you're dropping yourself into being present in the moment. Not wishing it was something different, not trying to change what it is. Flow states exist as an experience when you're in the moment. And that's what surrender is. It is what it is. Let's harvest the good in the moment, and we'll forgive the rest and just keep moving.
So good. And to understand that paradox of effort in what you resist persists. If anybody wants to know how to lessen the distance of resistance, I have a guide as well to reduce the distance of resistance. Email me, david@dmeltzer.com for that guide. All exercises, guides, and book and training are available today. david@dmeltzer.com. The last paradox before I let you get on to the Q&A session is one in which your wife, the incredible Cynthia Kersey, who wrote the Unstoppable Women book, is the giving paradox. Yes. Scarcity thinking tells us that giving reduces what we have. No, not receiving reduces what we have. And in the infinite loop of giving, where we give more, we're given more, and we ask and receive more, knowing that when we receive, we actually are giving a gift. When we receive, and this was the lesson that Cynthia Kersey taught me, when we receive, we're giving a gift because we feel closest to God. We are at our higher self when we're able and capable of helping other people. And by us allowing other people to be able and capable of helping, we are giving them the gift of being closest to God. We're giving the gift of higher self. And this is the giving paradox. And it is abundance that says the more we give, the more we're given. The more we're given, the more we receive. The more we receive, then we can ask for more than more, so we can give more than more, be given more than more, receive more than more, and ask for more than more than more. Now we're in this infinite loop of a giving paradox. Why do people have such a hard time receiving instead of having a hard time giving?
The net answer to that is worthiness. Most people do not believe they're worthy to receive. They don't believe that they're worthy of asking for assistance, asking for what they need in order to have the kind of life that they'd like. And that is, that just flies in the face of what is true in the universe. The universe is abundant. It doesn't concern itself with worthiness. Nature, when you look at nature, there is nothing in nature that serves exclusively as a center of accumulation. Everything serves as a center of distribution in some way. Everything is always giving, and as a consequence, there's got to be something in nature that's always receiving. There's nothing in nature that questions its worthiness. It just is, it just bees.
Crazy.
It just bees.
It does.
And there's a reciprocity that dials in a thriving environment. That reciprocity flourishes. There's giving, receiving, giving, receiving, giving, receiving, and it's a jungle out there. Hallelujah.
So good. The paradox of giving. If you want the exercise on the infinite loop of giving and the giving paradox, email me, david@dmeltzer.com. The infinite loop of giving will not allow you to live in scarcity. There's a zero-sum game. People don't realize that money, for example, is a man-made construct. The more love you give, the more you receive. The more generosity and kindness you give, the more you receive. But money is like a chair. The more chairs you give, the more you won't receive. Unless you give the chairs, then you use gratitude and forgiveness to see all that you're given from giving the chair, then receive it because you're worthy, and then ask for more chairs or more than more chairs. That's how the infinite loop will work. Get that guide exercise, David at dmeltzer.com. Blaine, when we look at these lessons today that we shared, there's a clear pattern that emerges.
Yep.
Success is rarely about forcing an outcome. It's about understanding the deeper principles that guide growth for the sake of what you desire in your divine direction. We all face hard things early in life, so it becomes easier later. We accept discomfort because it signals growth. We stay patient because progress compounds. When we align ourselves with these paradoxes, today, all available to you, we stop chasing success and we begin to clear the way to attract it. And these contradictions, these paradoxes we once struggled with become the very forces that move us forward. Everybody, if you want the guide or exercise from today, please email me, david@dmeltzer.com. Come and join me in Orange County, Vegas, Phoenix, SoFi Stadium, New York, New Jersey. That's just in the next couple weeks. We are there on the car wash, meetings, holding court, masterminds, fireside chats, movie, TV, documentaries. We are working on it all. Just stay informed and stay invited. David@dmeltzer.com. Join our text community, 949-298-2905. Most importantly, stay on board because my mentor, the incredible Blaine Bartlett, will do the Ask Me Anything Q&A, the value bonus edition of the Napoleon Hill Institute training. He is my mentor, teacher, and coach, the incredible Double B, BlaineBartlett.com. He'll move your possibilities into a reality. Blaine, thank you so much for carrying the torch. Thank you for carrying on. I'm going to let Nick set the room with you, help you out, bring on the questions for you. I will see you soon. God bless everybody. I'm out.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
All righty, Mr. Blaine. It is always good to see
buddy?
you here. And David, if you can, perfect, mute yourself. Thank you so much. Mr. Blaine, how are you today, my friend?
I could not be better, Nick. Thanks for asking.
Oh, of course. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we open things up for Q&A, for everybody that's joining us here online, make sure to put your questions for the Double B, that's Blaine Bartlett, in the chat. And then for all of our friends that are live here in the Breakfast with Champions on Clubhouse, which is the best room and community on Clubhouse, make sure if you're in the audience, use the hand icon to request to join the stage as you have your questions for Blaine here today. And if you're already on stage and have a question for Blaine, please just put a quick note in the room chat, and I will be happy to pass the mic over your way. And of course, Blaine, I want to be respectful of your time. How much time do you have here for this special Q&A session this afternoon?
I've got till the top of the hour.
Okay, beautiful. Awesome. So we'll get rocking and rolling. We got a ton of friends here on Clubhouse, and I have the queen of questions, which is Colleen, ready to rock and roll with the first question of the day. So Colleen, why don't you unmute yourself and kick us off?
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Dave and Blaine. Blaine, as a longtime mentor of mine as well, one of the paradoxical questions I think comes up for me is the idea of letting go, which allows you to create more control in your life. What practice do you use in reconciling where you need to let go of things in order to create more control in your life?
Oh, Colleen, that's a great question. The practice that I work with, and this is more of a meditation, people will confuse. I'm sorry.
We got you loud and clear. Sorry about that.
Right, cool.
I accidentally hit the mute button. We are good, Blaine. Keep rocking and rolling.
Yeah. When you think of meditation, just generically, most people think that it's an exercise in quieting the mind. It's actually an exercise in starting over. So when we think about how we get to be successful in life, it's not a one and done. The idea of sustainable success has to do with developing the capacity to continuously start over. Where we run into difficulty is we hang on to what we think was working. If I can just replicate this again, I'll continue to be successful. That's not how life works. Yeah, if we're hanging on to what was, we're going to just replicate what was. We're not going to be moving into new territory. So that begins to inform what is it that I'm going to be letting go of. Now, the practice of meditation, I quiet my mind and all of a sudden this noise comes through again. So I have to start over. I want to develop the capacity to continuously start over. One of the things that stop people from letting go, just the experiential piece, is a fear of becoming a learner, a beginner again. And so I find, for me, Colleen, I took up juggling a number of years ago because I wanted to be a beginner. And it was a very low threat way for me to do that. So I didn't start with balls. I started with handkerchiefs. Yeah, so they would float. But the idea of being a beginner, being willing to make mistakes, being willing to look foolish. And I did this in a training environment. I actually would invite people up on stage, and we would learn how to juggle together using these handkerchiefs. But the idea of being willing to be foolish, being willing to move back into a learner state, a beginner state, is really important if I want to look at how I sustain success in my life.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You bet. Great question.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen, for kicking us off on the right foot. And now it's time to pass it over to Desmond, who is patiently waiting here on stage with the next question. So, Desmond, my friend, why don't you unmute yourself and keep us rolling with the next question for Mr. Blaine?
Hey, Mr. Blaine. My question is referring to the slow and steady paradox. And that is, when someone is in the slow phase and starting to lose faith, what are some signs that you would look for to tell the difference between keep going and that this actually needs to change?
Yeah, that is the conundrum. That is where it actually gets a little interesting. I go back to, Desmond, for the sake of what? Now, I want to be careful here that I do not get attached to a specific outcome, because what I'm trying to achieve, the outcome that I've envisioned, is just a symbol of what actually it is that I'm looking to achieve. Money is an example. Money is a symbol of an experience that it will provide for me, whether it's freedom, whether it's safety, whether it's ability to travel, whatever it might be. So what matters is not the money. What matters is the experience that I'm seeking. So when I begin to ask that question and organize around that, I begin to let myself understand that maybe what I'm doing here in service of a specific structural outcome may not be serving me as well. What can I do that will enhance the likelihood of me achieving that actual experience that I'm seeking? We don't want to confuse the symbols of success with the experience of success. Does that help you?
Absolutely, it does.
He said, absolutely, it does. And Desmond, we want to thank you for bringing the fire with these great questions, both you and Colleen kicking us off. Blaine, we got a good friend of ours, which is Robin, who's now on stage here on Clubhouse. So Robin, it's always good to see you here. Happy Wednesday. Why don't you unmute yourself and keep us rolling with the next question?
Awesome. Happy Wednesday, Nick. Thank you very much. So, hi, Blaine. My question for you today is, how do you encourage creative thinking and innovation within an individual and an organization?
Great question. Once again, part of the way that you do that is through the use of questions. I mean, it may seem like a very cliche answer, but the use of questions, I mentioned this when David and I were talking, questions will serve two purposes. One is to just gather information. The other one is to actually point direction towards something. So some of the questions that you can ask around that is, we say we want to go in this direction. We would like to have that as an outcome. What are some possibilities that we've never tried that we might be able to leverage here? What are some things that we know our competitors are doing that we've never done before? And how would we do it differently that will set us apart from them? I mean, those sorts of questions begin to plant seeds in people's minds. And you want to be able to have the latitude for people to explore and answer in the best way that they know how to answer at that point in time. You do this consistently enough, you're going to start getting some very interesting answers coming out of that. Now, that's one piece. The other thing has to do with how you structure the conversation. We are in organizations in particular, very seldom does the facilitator, does the leader, does the manager start the meeting with, this is the kind of conversation we're having. We're having a conversation that is organized around putting things into action. So that's all we're going to entertain here. Okay, so that frames the conversational content. We're going to have a conversation about what ifs. Okay, and that's all we're going to talk about here is what ifs. So it's a creativity. We're not going to be talking about implementation. Where you end up short-circuiting innovative, creative thinking is when people very quickly go to, how are we going to do that? We don't know how to do that. The minute you start moving to how, you've lost the game. Creative thinking has absolutely nothing to do with how. That's a completely different conversation. So you want to separate those two, because if you start getting them collapsing on top of each other, you will quickly come to a point where people aren't thinking constructively or thinking out of the box. One of the things that I've done with some of the clients that I've worked with, I invite them to come up with a 1,000-year vision for their organization. What do we look like, smell like, taste like, sound like in 1,000 years? And they look at me like I'm crazy. I was going, yeah, no, just play with me. Yeah, in 1,000 years, we're still viable. We're still, and there are organizations, by the way, on the planet that are over 1,000 years old. Yeah, there's a ryokan in Japan that is about 1,800 years old. That being said, 1,000-year vision, you eliminate the how, because it's kind of like, and you also eliminate the personalities, because when we start envisioning 1,000 years out, I'm not in it. You're not in it. They aren't in it. So we take the identities out of it, and now it's just a free form whiteboard. Okay, you've got a framing. The organization has grown. It's been around for 1,000 years. What does it look like, smell like, taste like, sound like? What are we doing? What did we do to make it that way? Which you can kind of play with that a little bit without going into the how of it. But you start looking at actions. But you want to break the patterns that people have about how they think about what's possible. That's one of the major tasks of leadership, is to create possibilities in people's minds. Generate possibilities, then you can move it into probability through conversation. Move it into probability, you can hand it off to managers, and you can make it a reality. So leadership moves through management. Management puts it into practice. Possibility into probability, probability into reality. Does that help, Robin?
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate that answer.
You bet.
Beautiful. We're going to keep this train rocking and rolling. And just as a quick reset of the room here, as we're knocking on the door of what is the fourth quarter of this incredible Napoleon Hill Institute training with, of course, the chairman, David Meltzer, and our very, very special guest, Mr. Blaine Bartlett. Now, with that said, this is the Ask Me Anything portion. So Blaine is so gracious with his time. He is sticking around and doing some Q&A with everybody in the community. So for everybody that is joining us online, of course, as we are live everywhere, make sure you are putting your questions into the chat. And for any of our friends here on the Breakfast with Champions on Clubhouse, the best room and community on Clubhouse, if you're in the audience and have a question today, please use the hand icon to request to join the stage, and we will bring you up. And of course, if you're already on stage, please just put a quick note in the room chat, and we will be happy to pass the mic over your way. Blaine, I'm going to show some love to our friends here online for the next question of the day. So we have Jamichael, who is writing to us and saying that you mentioned integrated awareness. Can you expand a little bit more on the integrated learning aspect of that process that you spoke of? And of course, sharing his gratitude for being a part of the conversation and for you taking the time. So what do you got for us, Mr. Blaine?
Yeah, Jamichael, great question. I love the way that you actually positioned this. Integrated awareness. First of all, I notice what I'm noticing. Most people do not notice where their attention goes. Our attention gets hijacked on a daily basis. Squirrel, and then all of a sudden we're looking over here. The idea of awareness creates possibilities. An expansion of awareness creates visibility into choices that I didn't know existed before, or that I was actually not paying attention to. So that that awareness opens up, the sandbox, so to speak, here. Then I've got all kinds of stuff to play with. The integration piece, and I'd like you to imagine when you first learned to ride a bike. You probably saw somebody doing it, and you learned to walk, so you had some sense of what balance was about. But you've never, at that point in time, had never been on a two-wheeled instrument where you didn't have your feet bilaterally on the ground. They were now just kind of suspended in the air on these little pedal things that had no contact with the ground. Where does balance come in? You had to figure out. That's the integration process. It begins to live in the body. So integrated awareness is essentially me taking a noticing and beginning to look at what are the elements that are important in that noticing, and taking them, literally, there's a word, grokking. They become part of my beingness. I take them in, I start practicing with them, I start playing with them. This is how we begin to develop, what we generically call mindset. And another word for it is our paradigm structure, our belief systems. It's through the use of repetition. So I practice this. I practice getting on the bike. I take the training wheels off eventually. And then I wobble down the street and I start to get a sense of where's my center? Where's the balance piece? Where's the balance point? And that's from a body standpoint, from a physical standpoint, that's where I begin to integrate. The same is true with information and knowledge. I begin to integrate it into my way of thinking. It's not a one and done. There's a practice associated with it. The old euphemism of practice makes perfect. It doesn't. Practice makes habits. And what we want to be able to do are practice things that are going to generate the kind of habits that are consistent with producing the results that I say I'd like to have. So that habit development is what the integration process is actually about. And I want to do that in a way that I keep my awareness alive. And this is where, David and I talked about for the sake of what matters to me. I want to be, because I will start practicing things today that will serve me for a while. But in 10, 15 years, I may have to relearn something or unlearn and do something different. So that integration process is an ongoing dynamic. It's a process of learning, unlearning, and relearning.
Beautiful. And thank you so much, as always, Blaine and Jamichael, for the question. We're going to go back to our friends on Clubhouse, the best room and community which is, of course, the Breakfast with Champions community. Let me see here. We got the wonderful Marco Antonio, who is locked, loaded, ready to go with the next question. Marco, my friend, you got a lot of interference there. Let me see. We're going to pass on from Marco for right now. We have Allie, who is on stage and I know has a clear connection. So Allie, happy Wednesday. Why don't you unmute yourself and carry us on with the next question?
Happy Wednesday. Thank you, Nick. Hi, Blaine.
Hi, Allie.
As someone who's heavily on a journey leaning into her faith right now, my question for you is faith a form of knowing, or does it only exist in the absence of knowing?
Faith is a form of trusting. Think about it that way. Faith is the acknowledgement of the reality of the unseen. That's essentially what faith is. It's the acknowledgement of the reality of the unseen. And what we want to be able to do is keep the faith. Well, we keep coming back to that idea that what I'm desiring, what I'm tracking for, does exist. It does exist. I may not notice it from a physical perspective as I look around my world, but it does exist. And when we think about, the whole notion of it's already happened, I just haven't arrived. One of the things that I actually am talking about there, Ali, is, everything exists on first of all, everything vibrates. I'm going to get a little woo-woo with you here. A little,
I love this.
Yeah. There's frequency structures on everything. My phone, It doesn't, I mean, it vibrates obviously when it rings, but the material in it is vibrating at a very specific frequency state. And anything that is on that frequency state is available to anything else that's on that frequency state. So faith in part has to do with moving myself both spiritually, but also emotionally, intellectually, and eventually physically. And I can feel it in my emotions to the frequency band that what I desire lives on. When I move myself to that frequency band, everything that is on that frequency band is now available to me. It was always present, but I wasn't literally paying attention in a way that made it visible, in a way that made it useful for me. And it's literally a transformative phase change into a different frequency structure. So the law of attraction, in part here, is actually a secondary law. The law of vibration is the primary law. Everything vibrates, and what vibrates on that frequency band, that's what I attract. So faith is a mechanism by which I move myself in frequency to that unseen, temporarily unseen state of being. And if I hold that long enough, if I hold that consistently with high fidelity, things will begin to be accessible by me and can be used by me at that point in time to manifest what I say I'd like to have. It's already created. It exists on that plane.
Very powerful. I appreciate you. Spot on for me right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Allie. And Blaine, as we wind down with the last 11 minutes here, I have Brent here who has joined us on stage with the next question. So Brent, my friend, it's so good to see you. I know David and our crew is always looking forward to seeing you when we come out to New York and New Jersey. We're going to be there next Thursday, the 26th. So let's make sure to touch base on that. But in the meantime, what question do you have for Mr. Blaine Bartlett today?
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, we're holding down the East Coast over here. Thank you, Blaine. This has been a good reset. Just understanding that what are we doing to interfere with it. So thank you for that. I do always appreciate that. My question is the time for reflection. Right, we go through all these days like crazy, go. And there's all these things that we think are important, and we're doing the important things. How do you set aside time for reflection and then understanding what could be a divine detour and, changing the trajectory? I think a similar question was asked, but, I'm asking it in this way.
The pause that refreshes comes to mind here, just if I'm going to be cliche. I don't do I take that back. I actually do. My morning, I'll sit in the sauna. And that is a reflective period. It's kind of marked out on my calendar. But in terms of the kind of reflection that you're talking about here, I'll take a walk in nature. I'll just, it doesn't have to be a long thing, 5 minutes. I think where people get themselves wrapped around the axle, so to speak, around this whole notion of reflection and kind of all of that stuff, is they think it takes a lot of time. It really doesn't. All I want to be able to do is push back from my desk for a moment. 5 minutes. Just take a deep breath and let the noise clear just a little bit. The power of stillness is profound. I work. The work I do is kind of codified in something that I call the soul of business. Everything has a soul. The trees that I'm looking at, the water that I'm looking at out of my office window right now, there's a soul that informs that. And I don't mean this from a religious sense. I mean this from, there's something that gave birth to that rock. There's something that gave birth to that tree, to this monitor. There's a creative force. And and this is how you begin to course correct also. It wants to express itself as fully as it possibly can. Where it gets truncated, where it gets difficult for that expression to occur is when we get ourselves in a position where everything around us is so noisy that voice of expression can't actually be heard. So it may be screaming at me, but I've got so much noise going on around me and in me that I can't actually hear it. So if I can't hear it, I can't course correct, because sometimes that voice will say to me, it's time to move left. It's time to move left. And I kind of go, oh God, okay, what might that look like? So I start entertaining it, but I want to be able to, in a reflective state, quiet down enough so that I can actually be present to that voice. Does it show up all the time? Nah, 90% of the time it doesn't show up. But in that 10% where it does pop up, that's where I want to actually pay some attention. So I've structured my day. At the front end of the day, I've got about 15 minutes where I just that's kind of the meditative piece. But then throughout the day, 5 to 8 minutes, 6 to 4 minutes, something like that, about 5 times a day, I'll just kind of push away from the desk. I'll get up, I'll walk outside, take the dogs out, whatever it might be. But the whole intent there is to quiet, to just get away from.
Brent, does that help?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we need some quiet time. we need to let the message sink in.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Blaine.
You bet. You bet.
Thank you so much, Brent. And Blaine, it looks like we're down to our last 7 minutes here. I'm going to pass the mic over to our good friend, Mike, who has the next question of the day. So, Mike, my friend, it is always good to see you here. Happy Wednesday. What question do you have for Blaine today?
All right. I'm going to bring it back to the paradox framing. So, Blaine, in leadership and relationships, there seems to be a paradox between meeting people where they are and staying aligned with where we are going. How do we honor both without feeling disconnected to that?
The idea of leadership, I'll just kind of, the way I define leadership, Mike, and this is a great question. Leadership is the activity of influencing others in order to co-create coordinated movement in pursuit of a worthy ideal. That's how I define it, and that's how I work with it. So there's basically 4 components to it. One is influencing. So we take command and control out of the equation. Command and control has no place in this particular definition. Now, there's places where I want to be in, commanding and controlling, especially if I'm a dad and I'm taking my kids across the street and I want them to learn how to do that safely, as an example. But influencing is state of being. How do I show up? People start moving the moment I enter the room before I ever open my mouth, and it has to do with the energetic body that is there. Also, there's a story about who I am that actually gets in the room before I get in the room. So people are actually interacting with that story of me before they ever get to me. And I want to be able to find ways to have congruency in that story physical match. So when I enter the room, the story and who I am actually is consistent and congruent. That's where influencing starts to make a big difference, because I'm always causing movement, and that's what leadership does. It causes movement. So the part that you're asking about has to do with the co-creation. How do I co-create with somebody? I've got an idea. This is what I'd like to do. This is where we're headed. This is what we want to make happen. If I'm not going to command and control, what do? Well, I start asking questions. And this is where the for the sake of what comes into play. And it has to do, it sounds like this. If we do this, what will that make possible for you that you don't get to have, do, or be unless we did this? That question, you probably have to ask that 6, 7, 8, 10 times. What does it make possible for you if we did this? You begin to move people away from their preference about how it looks. And now you move them into what matters to them about this kind of movement that you're trying to produce, this outcome that you're trying to produce. And then, and this is the second part of your question that I've heard embedded in it, the coordinated movement piece is not about kumbaya. This is not a conflict-free environment. When you start looking at moving into places you've never been with people, and they are moving into places that they've never been with you, you will run into conflict. You can't not have conflict. The beauty of conflict, another word for conflict here is friction. When you rub your hands together real fast, you start to notice that it warms up. Friction or conflict generates heat. Heat is a cleansing element. It begins to burn away the stuff that's not needed. Enough heat will generate light, so it starts illuminating possibilities that we've never seen before. So part of the leadership challenge is, how do you actually facilitate appropriate conflict, appropriate friction in your organization, so that you're illuminating what's possible, keeping it in front of people, and you're also burning away, so to speak, the stuff that you no longer need. So it becomes a question of, what do we hold on to? What do we let go of? What do we need to learn new that we don't know how to do yet? And it's all predicated on that, for the sake of what? What matters to the individuals? And for example, if you've got a 10-person team, you will probably have 10 different answers to what this, whatever this is, makes possible. But it's all organized within the context of this thing that you're trying to make happen. So there's that meta structure, but then it's all built on these individual desires that matter to the individuals that are producing it. Is that useful?
That friction analogy was incredible. I'm saving this and replaying this. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Beautiful. And we are down to our final 2 minutes, my friend. And so I want to give you the opportunity, Blaine, to make sure to invite but not obligate everybody to get in touch with you, because I know everybody has more and more questions. I got countless requests here on Clubhouse, and the questions keep flowing in the chat. So where can everybody get in touch with you to get empowered with that soul of business?
You can go directly to my website, blainebartlett.com. Okay, and that's in the signature line there. But also, if you've got an email, feel free to email me at info@avatar-resources.com, which is my company.
Beautiful. And thank you so much, Blaine. And of course, I know that you are going to be a repeat offender here with these Napoleon Hill Institute trainings. So I know everybody is very excited to get a more weekly dosage of the double B. That's Blaine Bartlett. And for everybody in our community, as we round things out here, we want to make sure to invite but not obligate you to come and join us in person, whether it is tomorrow in Newport Beach for our mastermind and VIP dinner. Of course, we call that, we call it a car wash. So it's going to be a VIP dinner, mastermind, TV show filming, community meetup, holding court, interview, speeches, etc. Then we're going to be off to Viva Las Vegas for Office Hours TV show season number 10, another car wash there. Then over to New York and Red Bank, New Jersey, another car wash over there. Over to Phoenix, Arizona with the pro athlete community, another car wash. Over to Augusta, Georgia for the Masters Mastermind, as we have another car wash there. And then back to Phoenix, Arizona with the Aspire Business Tour, family and community. So if you would like these invitations, but not obligations, over 200 every single year, all you need to do is text us directly at 949-298-2905. Of course, if you would like the guide and exercise from today's training, all you need to do is email David directly, david@dmeltzer.com. That's David@D, first initial, Meltzer, last name.com. And last but most certainly not least, before I let everybody go, I want to remind everybody to make sure they get their copy of David's new book, which is Don't Do Business with Dicks. You can get it everywhere, whether it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books. Or of course, you can visit dmeltzer.com/order to get your copy today. Once you've gotten your copy, all you got to do is let David know so he can send you the rest of his books completely for free. Sending you a copy, signing a copy, and even pay for shipping, folks. It's just david@dmeltzer.com. Of course, we will be back as we have lives every single day, but especially for our friends on Clubhouse. We will see you for this week's Free Friday training at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday ahead. And of course, as we always say, continue to be more interested than interesting, and be kind to your future self. And do good deeds. Hit it, Gigi.
They discovered it, they read it, and they applied it. It's the golden thread that connects the titans of the self-development industry, the source that spawned millions of millionaires, the original blueprint to success.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Think and Grow Rich.
Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. It's a classic. A classic.
And I love Think and Grow Rich. I love it. It's right here. I mean, it's one of my favorite books of all time.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
This material is what changed my life. This is the material I study every day. From being an immigrant woman, coming from poverty, and really coming to America and literally achieving the American dream. I can't even tell you how grateful I am for this man, for what he did for me and my family.
Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve.
People don't realize is that when we let our ego get in our way, ego is the loss, the fear of loss. So need to be right, the need to be offended, the need to be hurt, fearful. When that trajectory changes, what happens is you continually go the wrong way. So my job as a coach is to say, let's get into the enjoyment of the direct pursuit of my potential. Right? And so when the light went on, it was not about the potential of making money and being an entrepreneur, which is one of my specialties. And I said to him, look, this is an opportunity now to show how great you really are. We can't let the outside voices, right, determine our success. The happiness that we have comes within. Why are you going to give that control to somebody else?
Thoughts become things. And I always wonder, why did no one teach us this? Why did we not learn this in school? Why did we not learn this from our families? If you make your study a priority, your life will change.
And I came up with 4 really valuable things that I took stock in. And the first one was gratitude. Simple gratitude. Although I grew up with nothing, I was always grateful. Throughout the whole process of consistently, persistently pursuing my potential, I was grateful. It made my past better, my present brighter, and my future even brighter than that. In fact, I tell people all the time, if you want to change your life, change your employee's life, your family life, it's very simple. 2 words, say thank you.